everyone. We're just waiting a couple minutes for everyone to get into the webinar. All right. Good afternoon. Today is Wednesday, April 27th, and a special board meeting is called to order. I want to welcome any budget committee members who are joining us today. This is a board meeting, not a budget committee meeting, but since this meeting is centered on learning about the budget process, we have invited budget committee members to participate. We have Director or Second Vice Chair Maria Hinojos Pressy present, Director Marty Hyen present. Let's see, looking, Director Guzman Ortiz. I think that is it for the board right now. Others may join us shortly. And thank you to the budget committee members who have joined us this afternoon. I'm now going to turn the meeting over to Superintendent Perry, and I can call on people as there are questions. Thank you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is our last lunchtime 45-minute budget meeting. So I'm going to try to give you a bit more information and then future forward and think what's coming up in the coming weeks. Thanks for participating with us on this. It feels like I'm hopeful it was helpful. I've done a little bit of spot checking with people to see, was this a helpful format for you? So with that, one question that came up last week was from Budget Committee member Levy Herrera Lopez, and he asked about, did we have some assets or revenue or a pot of dollars that was related to some equity-based funding of equipment and things. And it came up about out of a conversation about some music instruments and choir robes a number of years ago when he was on the budget committee. And so the answer to that is yes, we have about, this year, we've spent about $600,000 on what we consider making sure people have, or kids have the stuff and things they need. So choir robes, musical instruments, risers for choirs, registration to events so that every school has access to register to some of our major events. So that was the answer to that question. And that is something we're planning to roll forward in the next SIA budget as well. And then we had questions about school specific resources. So how do those work? So we have to think of money in kind of two different ways. One is there's money that goes directly out to schools and they have more discretion over how to use those dollars. And if you look at the dollars, we have about 8 million allocated out to schools specifically. And so this is our kind of allocation. There's about 300 million to elementary, 2 million to middle, 3 million to high. And it helps fund a lot of the more minor stuff and things, printing at our print shop, all of those sorts of things. But at the district level, we also have resources that are stuff and things for school. So sometimes at the district level, we're buying the equipment for our custodians. We are buying the purchase of technology for our classroom teachers. And we do that out of the district funds. So it's not like more of a discretionary funds for our schools. And then the allocations are based on enrollment. So a Brush College that has a small number of kids has different allocation of their print money and all of that than a Chavez Elementary who has, like 400 more kids. And then also we have quite a few Title I schools, and they have additional funds that they can sometimes buy additional curriculum or intervention programs or some additional technology that supplements those. And so they have to develop plans around those. some questions came up about PERS, and I realized last week I didn't think I gave enough of an answer around PERS, so I wanted to give a little bit more context. So rate increases in the PERS, the Public Employees Retirement System, are related to an unfunded liability, in that PERS is expecting a group of people to retire, and right now they have to be sure they have enough money in the bank to fund that liability, is what they're calling it. And the PERS rates are set as a percent of the employee wages. So we get the rates from PERS. They have been rising. They've started to flatten a little bit, which is a really good thing. They've made some adjustments in the system to help flatten the rates. But we are required to pay a certain percentage of our employee costs for PERS. Somebody in Sarah's shop, I think it might have been Annalie, who made this for us to think about the we fund our debt service rate. So we've also borrowed to buy down our unfunded liability. And it was a really great financial decision at the time. Nancy was involved in at least one of those, where we bought down our liability and now are paying it like a debt. So we charge a 9.5% revenue that goes directly to our debt service fund to pay for our debt. And it's intended to fund not only the principal, but the interest, and then pay our PERS rate charges. So this chart kind of tells you we put 9.5% of our wages to our PERS revenue fund. You saw that last week in Bob's presentation. We build the balance in the fund to pay our PERS bond and our debt payments. So that's kind of how the money works. We bonded in 2015. And that was when Nancy was there. We bought down all of our unfunded liability at the time. The board had also done it in 2002 and 2004. And again, really good financial decisions at the time because of where interest was. And they really saved. We calculated one time, and I can't remember the exact calculation, but the millions of dollars that the board at that time, by making that decision, saved that could go to kids in classrooms. But right now, you notice that our current unfunded liability is raising again. It's up to 466.9 million of our unfunded liability. So it continues to grow. We continue to navigate. And if there's ever a time when our financial company believes it's time to refinance our unfunded liability again, they'll come to us and the board and say, hey, we should talk about this again. And then that would be another board decision. Okay, so this is how the percentage works. So our tier 1 and tier 2, and this includes retirees. We pay this amount on our retirees as well. We pay 16.29% is our PERS rate for our retirees. If we have OPSERT members, it all depends on when people were hired. It's at 13%. Salem-Keizer is a district that pays 6% of the pickup. What sometimes people say is, why don't you have your employees pay that? Because then that will cost you less. There are districts that don't pay the PERS pickup. We have always paid the PERS pickup. It's something we would have to bargain. But in addition, sometimes those salaries in those districts look higher because they look higher than ours because we're paying the pickup. So we always have to calculate that in when we're doing salary comparisons based with our employees. So the PERS rate totals are of our payroll are 31.79% or 28.9 or 68% when you add on that 9.5% cost for our debt service. So you can see why so much of our budget goes to people, and the cost of what it means to pay a fair wage, to have health insurance, and to pay into the retirement system. And when people say to me, well, can you not just drive down your personnel costs? Why can't you save money around? And I say because it's the people who get to graduation for kids. There isn't a story out there from a student that wouldn't say there wasn't an important adult that helped them, teach them, mentor them, guide them to get them to graduation. So I always have to put in my plug for our educators. I'm going to come back to this at the end because I want to get through the rest of the presentation. Where we go from here, and I'll bring you back to the budget book at the end, is that next week I will release the budget message on Tuesday night. And you're going to get to the place of, we're going to have some questions about this. Just like we've done with this process, the questions you've asked us in these last few meetings have been things we've been able to quickly answer almost in the moment for you. We had you send them in to us. We've spent a little bit of time preparing. And so for most of the questions you're going to want to ask, we'll have those and be able to answer them in the meeting. If there's a place that requires significant staff time and research, we're going to ask you as a committee of 14, is this something you need to approve the budget? Sometimes it's things like you're interested in, which is awesome, like dual language. We had a work session last night, but is it something you need to pass the budget? And if it is, how much information do we need? And does the committee agree? Because it's really easy in this process to have somebody want something big that's super interesting, but if we have 14 people, we don't have enough staff time to spend 15 hours on every request. I'm just exaggerating. So that's how we say to the committee, please tell us, are these things you want us to work on? We'll give you whatever you need to be able to pass the proposed budget. We can use Robert's rules for this. The chair may call for a vote to say, okay, it seems like we have some disagreement here. Let's just call for a vote. Is this the what we want the district to work on, to come back to us? 8 of you say you want it. We'll get it together, bring it back to you. But again, that's not for every little picky thing like where's the PERS number? Why did it increase? Most of those things we want you to ask. They're not really picky questions. There's little questions. We want you to ask them in the moment when we spend time around the budget book, and we'll have all of my executive team plus Sarah and all of her analysts with us in the budget committee process so that we can just give you that information in the moment. And we'll work really hard to say, if somebody asks me a side question somewhere, to bring all of that back into the budget committee process so everyone gets the same information. So next week is your first meeting. The very first order of business will be to elect a chair and vice chair. Even though these meetings have been run by our board leadership because they're school board meetings, you as a group of 14 will need to elect, because this is a totally different committee. And it could be a board member or a community member. The tradition has been that it's one of each, so it's representative of both committee and school board. And often they've rotated, like 1 year it's the board, 1 year it's a budget committee member. Doesn't have to be that way. And over the past couple of years, because of all that we've been navigating, they've here and there, they've made choices to change that protocol as a committee. The proposed budget book that you'll get next week is going to follow almost an identical format as the one you've been looking at. And that's why I thought it was really important to spend so much time in the adopted budget book. May 17th is time for questions and answers of the budget committee. You'll receive public comment. May 23rd, questions and answers. You'll receive public comment. If you're ready to go on the 23rd, you can pass a motion to approve the proposed budget. If we need more time for public comment, we have 24 and 25 tentatively scheduled. In my time in Salem-Keizer, a couple times we've gone to the full time, Other times we have been done on that Monday or Tuesday night. It depends a lot about how many questions and much public comment you have, but we'll be prepared either way.
Superintendent Perry.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Director Hyan has her hand up.
All right.
Thank you. So my mind kind of went into Never Never Land for a moment. So maybe you said this, Christy. So traditionally, we would have a public member of our budget committee be chair 1 year and a board person, the vice chair, and then it would flip back and forth. I didn't see that though in our actual written policies. So is this something that we just always did and we never codified it in writing, or do you remember?
Yeah, Alice and I were looking at that the other day, and I don't think we ever codified it in writing. It was just more of a tradition, because I remember at least once where we didn't do that.
Right. And I had a problem with it because it's like, well, this is how we've always done it. But I was surprised not to find it in the written policy.
Yep, that is correct. I don't think it's in there.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right. So a question that Amanda is going to ask you is, she is going to send you an email today and say, do you want a written or hard copy of the budget book? So are you an online person, or do you need a hard copy? And we will accommodate you with whatever one of those you want. If you're asking for a hard copy of the budget book, somebody from Salem-Keizer will deliver it to you. We need to know where to deliver it, but she'll cover all that for you. If you are an online person, the budget will be posted on the public website. I'm not exact sure. We kind of try to time it with my release, because the public gets to have access to the budget the same time you as a budget committee get to. So Amanda will ask you that question, and we'll then schedule delivery. Traditionally, when we're in the room together, we hand out hard budget book copies, but we've gotten so much more proficient at this online format, so people are more and more going the other direction. Okay, so another question that was asked, and I'm going to ask Suzanne to pull this up for us. She's online today, and just walk you through it. Nancy asked the question about kind of a lot of the social emotional supports, and did we have a way to share and quantify those results or those expenditures? And so Suzanne, I think she's on here, is going to share her screen and put it up for you and walk you through it. And we're also going to put the link to it in the chat, so you can have access to it. It's on our website for everyone to see.
Yes, I'm pulling it up right now. Give me just a minute to make sure I do this correctly.
Yeah. Thanks, Suzanne. I think I went a little quicker than you were anticipating.
Nope, no problem at all. I think I've got it now. If this doesn't work, I can always do a redo, right? There we go. Okay. So what you see here right now is a screenshot. Well, it's not a screenshot. It's the actual web page where this graphic is located. The graphic that you're looking at is a walkthrough of, I'm just going to orientate you to this quickly without going through it in detail, but it's a walkthrough of the process we've been undertaking for the last many years. You'll notice that this timeline begins in 2016-17. That's when we first, as a district, began systematic efforts to address the social, emotional, and behavioral health of our students. And we started that work by establishing an Office of Behavioral Learning. That effort has just grown over the many years. You'll notice in the narrative at the top that we started with approximately $18 million in annual expenditures related to social, emotional, and behavioral health. And that includes everything from the counselors in our schools to behavior specialists to social workers to behavior trainers. We've grown that to close to $40 million in expenditures, and we're continuing to add. And we're doing that because as we are adding resources and getting better at meeting the needs of students. We're also identifying gaps that we need to fill. So that's one of the main reasons why you've seen these expenditures climb as we've continued to fill some of those gaps. So this graphic, when you look at it, you'll be able to see the timeline that we followed for our social, emotional, behavioral health efforts. You'll also notice some language that maybe you're not familiar with. And we have available for you just down below that a glossary to help you understand what do each of these things mean in our system. And that's pretty important to orient yourself to, because when you hear the word counselor, some of us have a schema for what that is because of our personal experience, but what a school counselor does in an actual school environment might be different than that schema. So please familiarize yourself with those terms in the glossary as well. I'll drop the link in the chat. And then are there any questions right now, or Superintendent Perry, would you like to take over?
Yeah, let's just open up for questions now, Vice Chair Carson Cottingham, because we have a little bit of time. There weren't a ton of questions that came in last week. So let's just open it up to see if people have questions that we can answer, anything about the budget process looking forward, anything want to go back to the budget book at all.
I have a question about PERS. Sorry, could you coming back? I understand the PERS pretty minimal. Obviously we have PERS from back in the day that I guess was a big problem. And then kind of, if I understand correctly, and then it got fixed up as far as percentages and it's under control for the future. But how much of the percentage back, so people who are now retiring with really tier 1 extra plus, like when are those people going to be done? Meaning, are we expecting like next 30 years, or are we talking about when do we catch, I guess, the problem? So will this be a budget issue? The big, or I mean, obviously first it's important, that's great, but it sounds like there might have been a hiccup on how they used to deal with it. So 30 years from now or 40 years, how far out?
I'm going to see if Sarah has read any estimates lately. The tier 1 employees were hired before. I think it changed from tier 1 to tier 2 in like 92. And so the bulk of our tier 1 employees are at 30 years of service. So that means you're starting to see more the kind of the end of the tier 1 employees, which are a higher rate. But I think we have, if we can just have it be level, I think that's the best we can hope for in probably 15 to 20 years. But Sarah, do you have any additional thoughts on that?
I would agree with that. I think if it was level in 15 to 20, that would be good. I haven't seen anything lately about, the 10 years and 20-year forecast, but inflation is a definite concern in there. And it's important to note that even though the tier 1 and 2 people are retiring, there is a component in an OPSERP employee's rate that is to still sort of make up for tier 1 and 2. So as those people are retiring out of the workforce, we still have some liability to make up. And I'm not sure what the timeline is for that at this point. So when you see the rate for an OPSERP person, some people call that tier 3, that rate has an additional component in it where we're fixing the system from before.
Okay, so in summary, in about 15 or plus years or so, we should be back to a stable scenario with PERS.
Yes, but still things like inflation and the market still cause some volatility in it.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a comment related to that.
Dr. Hyan?
Thank you. So we keep paying a rate until they're no longer on PERS at all, correct? Until they passed away, basically. Is that right? And so I'm a tier 1 retiree, and I expect that the state's going to have to pay me for at least 30 more years. So just saying.
In theory, we have paid for you, or your employer has, and funded that and put that money there. So if it was a break-even perfect proposition, you wouldn't still be, your employer isn't still paying, they paid during those years, but we were a little short. And so that's why there is that component still.
That unfunded.
Okay,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
I didn't quite understand. Thank you, Sarah. That helps.
Yeah.
So I guess Secretary of State's office is probably relieved that they won't have to pay for 30 more years.
You probably don't have to pay that long.
Yeah. And when the actuarials estimate, they estimate based on life expectancy and where life expectancy is. So it's a complicated formula. And I hope that they pay you for 30 more years too, Marty.
Thank you. Yes, the women in my family do live into their 90s. So
That's awesome.
I have that expectation or
That's
hope.
good.
Maybe.
Mhm. What other questions?
I was wondering if we're going to see any change in funding for summer meals. I know that during COVID, I felt like there was a lot more summer meals available. I wonder if it's going to change, or if it's going to continue because of the inflation and economical issues nowadays.
I think Suzanne or Sarah can answer this, but during the pandemic, they relieved some rules around how you can feed kids. And the reimbursement for that. And since that time, they've gone back to the same rules, the pre-COVID rules. So as the emergency declarations have gone away, the rules for school lunches now fall under the old rules. And so summer lunches, there's a summer lunch program that we will give, but some of the other ways we did it during the pandemic won't be, so it won't be as widespread. And Suzanne, anything you want to answer on that?
No, that's exactly right. The only addition is that for students who are participating in summer programs, they'll have access to meals as well, in addition to the sites that we stand up every summer for summer meal program for students in grades K through 12.
Yeah. And we try to position our school meal sites at locations throughout the community so that there's lots of access to the summer meal sites. And I think our summer learning grant is about $7 million for summer learning opportunities in the community.
I noticed in one of the slides that you had elementary school, middle school. I think elementary was like 70 million, middle school 100 and something, and then high school 400 and something. Is the big jump just because high schoolers have a lot more activities after school, so that's why the huge jump?
Yeah, that was, if you're talking about the slides I presented today, that was related to their supply money, their little bit more discretionary money in their in the schools. And a big part of that is because there's so many more kids in a high school. And things like science supplies, science equipment's so much more expensive than print and pencils and crayons and glue sticks and all of that.
Levy?
Yeah, are there any sort of expense categories that have begun to wind down related to COVID response, like materials, training, supplies, anything like that?
That's a good question. We have all the test kits, tons of masks, all of that. So a lot of that is winding down unless there's a spike. So we kind of want to be ready for if we have to go back in. Some of the big expenses were around the nursing cadre, and we still have so many more needs with kids with medical needs. So, and that's funded out of ESSER. I think we've shifted so many of our protocols that I just don't know, like we've shifted responsibility. So we had a couple people in HR that only did COVID response. Now they're shifting back to some of their other work. We had emergency operations that only was doing COVID. Now they're shifting to all the emergencies in school. So it's more shifting than expenditures that have wound down. And I'll go back and think about that more carefully too before the budget starts. All right, it's a quiet group. What do you think, Vice Chair Carson Cottingham?
Any last questions from anyone? We can certainly end early. Oh,
Did I hear correctly that for those of us who decide to get the budget online, we will not get a physical one next week at the meeting? We will just have it by email, or just say we will also get one?
Yeah, Amanda's going to email you and ask if you want a hard copy, because we are virtual next week.
Okay.
And if you want a hard copy, we'll deliver it to your house or your office or wherever. If you don't, it'll be online for you and we'll tell you how to get it.
Is it possible? Am I still okay? Is it possible to see one physically, like check it out, but then sometimes I like to see what I'm going to be seeing.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to use all the trees. Like I want to pass it on to somebody else in my. So that's okay. Well, I'll talk to whoever.
Yeah, I love that. You can't, you just have to either have your own or not, because then once we get through the budget process, it's obsolete because we can move on to adoption.
Yeah, okay.
So
technology. I
know.
Gotta get over it, but
I understand. Sometimes I get a good paper book out. It just feels better than the Kindle.
It does.
Levy, I see your hand again.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask if there's anything related to the dual language expansion that you would want to share with the group today that's within our current academic year, for anyone who maybe they didn't hear the presentation last time.
Yeah, so on the dual language expansion, just a little preview to the budget, not quite telling you, but it's one of those programs that blends and braids funds. So in this current year's budget, we have some program assistants and a coordinator and a portion of this year's contract for dual language New Mexico, both in the Gen Fund and in the SIA fund. And in addition, out of SIA, we have quite a few positions that are funding a lot of our newcomers and our secondary English language learners that need a different type of instruction and support than they'll get immediately in dual language. So that's kind of how to think about it in the budget context. What you also have to remember is that we have lots of classroom-based positions in the budget that are in our transitional biliteracy program. So if we were starting, since we shared schools last night, if we were starting Chavez tomorrow, you're not going to immediately see an ad for a teacher, because we take the teacher that's teaching transitional biliteracy and move them to a dual language program. So it isn't every classroom we're adding a teacher. We've kind of prepped for this moment because our current bilingual teachers are trained in good instructional strategies, and will begin converting that to the dual language program. So sometimes it means a school gets more FTE or another teacher, but a lot of times we're converting the transitional programs. So that's something to think about in the budget process. You'll see professional development, you'll see some things on curriculum materials, and I'll pull that into a presentation after the budget message so you can kind of see where all that is supported. And it'll be blended between SIA and Gen Fund and the conversion of teachers. And right now at the elementary level, we're in really solid shape with hiring of bilingual teachers to do the dual language expansion. All right, Barbara.
Yeah, thank you. I had a question about Amiguitos. This was a private Salem-Keizer pre-kinder program that was being run at the East Salem Community Center, I believe it's called. And it was discontinued because of the pandemic or shortly. I guess I'm curious if that's coming back. That's a good option for kids who, again, Salem-Keizer it gets paid for it because we pay, it was a private thing, but to get the kids ready for the bilingual school. So I'm just curious if there's any, you might not know, if there's any chatter about bringing those back. The teachers there were incredible, and I felt like it was a good step up process. Some of those kids ended up going to the programs that they had for Title I too. So they went from the pre-kinder or preschool to the Title I, Head Start, to get them ready for. So it was kind of a transition program that was really helpful, and it was sad to see the teachers there, I guess, close the program. So I'm just curious if that's going to come back.
I'm going to see if Olga has any immediate information on that, if she's on, and if not, we'll get back to you.
Yes, I'm here, Christy, and I am going to do a little bit of research on these. We have two very well-known pre-K programs that use some of our dual language practices, and as part of our plan is to connect with them. And yeah, so I will bring some more information about those.
Thanks, Olga.
Nancy?
Is there a link to the dual language information that was presented last night?
Yeah, I will have Amanda send you the link to the work session, and in that also send you the link to the PowerPoint slides. They're all on the website, but we'll get it for you.
Man, that website. I just looked on the website and didn't see them. So
If you have a chance to watch the video, Olga's presentation, so phenomenal to help walk through. I took away so much. It was really helpful.
Yeah.
As always, Olga, as always. Perfect. Thanks so much.
Yep, and we'll get it out in the links after the meeting.
Okay. Not seeing any more hands except for Nancy's that's still up. Anyone else? All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you, Superintendent Perry, and we will call this meeting adjourned. Have a great afternoon.
Have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.